Go ahead and be seated. So, good morning.
Good morning.
So, today we're going to continue our journey through the season of creation. Over the past 2 weeks, we've explored what it means to pray for creation and then to learn about how we can support the work to care for the world. Last week, we heard from Mary about the work of a company out of Tacoma who's removing PFAS from our water. Abby talked about the Environmental Defense Fund and the Arbor Day Foundation. And Lynn had lots of good practical tips about how we can reduce waste by using what we have, transitioning from paper towels to reusable towels, and the kind of silverware we use at home and at our schools, and using the fruits of the earth, like the apple tree in her backyard, and shared some of the apple crisp that was from the apples in the backyard. And I have to say, so good. And this week we have donuts from North Bend Bakery for coffee hour. I apologize, they won't be as good as the apple crisp, but they're still good. But if you want to know more about the organizations that they talked about last week or the recipe for the apple crisp, it was in the newsletter that went out on Thursday. So go and check that out, read about those organizations, and feel free to sign up for coffee hour and bring apple crisp. Now, this week, we move into action. Remember, Season of Creation has pray, learn, do, which is this week. And then we have advocate, and then our final week will be bless. And so when we think about doing, we might immediately jump into tasks and activities and projects, and we think about things like recycling and reducing our carbon footprint or planting trees. And yes, those matter very deeply. But today I want to expand what it means to do. In this context, doing isn't just about physical actions that we take to care for creation. It's also about how we see creation, how we appreciate it, and how we experience God's presence within it. So part of the work of creation care is to slow down and to see the sacredness of the world around us, to acknowledge that God's presence permeates everything. This week, I want us to think of doing as both acting and seeing. It's about doing our part to care for creation, but also about seeing God in creation and appreciating the world and worshiping God through that awareness. God is not distant from creation, watching from God is not distant from creation, watching from afar. God is deeply present and intertwined in the world. God's love flows through every part of creation, in the air we breathe, the water that we drink, and the food that we eat. And the beauty of the natural world and its intricate system shows us God's ongoing and creative work. And this means that creation itself is sacred, and how we treat it and how we see it tells us a lot about how we understand God. So in today's gospel reading from Mark, Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Right? And Peter boldly answers, "Jesus is the Messiah." But soon after, when Jesus speaks of the suffering to come, Peter rebukes him, and Jesus responds with the really famous words, "Get behind me, Satan." He says, "For you're setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." And we think about what's happening here. Peter has identified Jesus as the Messiah, but his understanding is still really incomplete. He hasn't fully grasped the bigger picture of what it all means. And in the same way, we often limit our view of God's presence in the world. We might know that God created everything, but do we know that God is in everything? Just as Peter's understanding needed to grow, so too does our awareness of God's presence within the world around us need to grow. So this week, as we focus on doing, I really want to invite you to see creation with new eyes. When you look at a tree, don't just see a tree. See the creative hand of God. And when you feel the warmth of the sun, and hopefully we feel the warmth of the sun, recognize the life-giving energy of God. And when you hear the sound of water flowing in the stream, know that God's grace is present, sustaining the earth. And this is part of our doing, is to pause and to notice and to see God in every part of creation. And in addition to seeing God in creation, we are also called to worship through our connection to the world around us. The Bible's full of imagery that links creation to worship. In Psalm 19, we hear, "The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork." One of my favorite things to do is to sit on the back porch and just look up at the sky. You know, if you follow me on Facebook, you know this, I take pictures of that sky almost every day. And some days it's full of clouds, and other days it's, this great blue sky, but the mountain is always there. And it calls me to worship God. And it calls me to say, God is with us. And when we focus on seeing and appreciating God in creation, we can't forget the second part of doing, taking action. So our faith is not passive, and we know that here at St. Clair's for sure. We are called to participate actively in God's ongoing creative work in the world. And this means we each have a role to play in creation, and no matter how small that role might seem. And it can feel overwhelming, especially when we think about the enormity of the problems facing our planet, right? We have climate change, pollution, deforestation. These are huge issues. And it can feel like it's way beyond our individual ability to address. But God doesn't ask us to do everything at once. God asks us to do what we can, where we are, and with the resources that we have. Every small action, when done in love, can make a difference. And the great news is we're not doing it alone. God created us to be in community, not only with one another, but with all of creation. The work of caring for creation is not something we do in isolation. It's something that we do together as a community of faith and as part of the wider world. When we act together, we come together as a church, as a neighborhood, and a global community. Our impact is multiplied. It's like our rocks when we did our prayers, right? Each new rock created a cumulative effect, and same is true for our actions. And it's why community action is so powerful. Together, we can do more than any one of us can do on our own. And together, we can make a real difference. So next week, we're going to talk about advocating. We'll talk about the bigger picture and how we encourage corporations and the government to honor creation. But this week is about how each one of us can contribute, both through our small actions and by nurturing a deeper sense of reverence for the beauty around us. So I want to challenge each of us to do something this week that helps us to both care for and see God in creation. I have a list of 20 things. They're out like where the bulletins sit, so you may have already grabbed one. If not, grab one after the church. And it's 10 of the ways are how to see God in creation, and it challenges you to do things like go sit and look at the mountain. Go and go by the water and see the water. To see God, take a nature walk. Go take a photograph. Sit in silence next to some beautiful flowers. So there's like 10 different ways to challenge yourself to go out and be in creation and see it and see God in it. And then there are 10 ways to do something towards conservation, whether that is reducing water use or the way that little things, in the way we sort our recycling. So get that list and try to do at least one on the list this week, if not one in each category. Because when we do these things, we are caring for creation and we are seeing God in creation. We are living out our faith in a way that reflects God's presence in the world. So let us go forth, not just as stewards of the earth, but as people who recognize that through creation we come to know and worship God more deeply.